Welcome to Turning the Page, a Lexington Public Library podcast. I'm Mariam Adarat.
And I'm Erin West. If you love the library because of books, the programs, and the people behind both, then this is the podcast for you.
And even if you don't, there's still fun to be had. We will bring you the latest book releases that are worth checking out, figuratively and literally.
And we will discuss all of the happenings at the library to look out for.
And of course, what would a library podcast be without a special guest? We will get to know some special authors that are making an impact on our local literary scene.
Whether you're listening to us in your car while washing dishes or snuggled up with a warm drink, we are grateful for your time and hope you enjoy.
Good day, everyone. Our guest today is Wes Blake, a local author and essayist that has recently released a book titled Pineville Trace. This book is the story of Frank Resett, an escapee from a minimum security prison. Before he went to prison, Frank was a Southern revival preacher that had amassed a large following, but he's now running away from the mistakes of his former life in search of redemption amidst the wilderness. Along with him is his companion, a cat named Buffalo. Frank embarks on a journey to break out of the internal prison cell that he created himself. Welcome to the podcast, Wes. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Good. So before we get started, I have to tell you, I'm hearing a lot of good things about Pineville Trace, your book, from staff and patrons of the library, as well as other fellow writers across social media. So that's great. How does it feel to be, on this road finally after letting your baby out into the wild?
Well, first of all, thank you. That's great to hear. It's a lot of fun. So this is my first book. This is my debut book. So it's great. So have been writing for a long time. So it's kind of like playing music in a room with no audience, and to be able to share it with people, it's a lot of fun.
Good.
And this character, Frank, it's actually the second book I've written about him. So it's nice to finally share this character with folks. And of course, Buffalo, the cat's always fun to share too.
Of course. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up and how did you get started writing?
So I was born in Lexington, but I don't have no memories from that time in Lexington. So it was just a year. And then I was the first 6 years of the 1980s, I was in Moorhead, Kentucky. And so my first memories are there and hiking through Daniel Boone National Forest. And Dad worked for Kentucky Utilities, so we moved a little bit here and there, but it was always in Kentucky.
Yeah.
So we got the tour. So we were there for 6 years in Moorhead, Kentucky, in Rowan County, and then we lived with my grandmother and nanny in Mount Sterling for about half a year, and then we moved to Lexington and lived here for 3 years in the mid to late 80s, and so. Then we moved to Western Kentucky, to Morganfield, Kentucky in Union County, and we lived there for about 3 years and then back to Lexington.
Wow.
So, yes, so then went to high school here, went to UK, then my wife and I have lived in Louisville, and we've lived in Nonsuch, Kentucky, which is rural southern Woodford County for, I think, about 11 years now.
Oh, wow. So that's home now.
That's home now, basically.
Good.
Yes.
Good. So which high school did you go to, just out of curiosity?
Dunbar.
Yep. Okay. So, yeah. Our rivals, Erin.
Oh, really? What'd you get?
We're Generals. We are Lafayette Generals.
Oh, yeah. I had friends at Lafayette. It was funny. I went to the Carnegie, have this fantastic, if there's any writers listening, it's a fantastic thing to be involved with, but it's a Books in Progress conference. And so you can even get more involved. They have year-long things that you can do as well if you're working on a manuscript. But I went to that, and David Arnold was there, and I was listening to him, and we got to talking, and we realized we both went to Dunbar like within the same time, and that was kind of weird. We had no idea.
I guess that's the life of high school now. It's just so big, kind of.
Yes.
Some people, you can get around with anonymity, sort of.
True.
But so Pineville Trace, it's written in a novella format, yet you managed to pack a lot of punch in it. It's a lot of story in a physically smaller book. How are you able to tell so much of story with nuance, yet keep it so short?
That novella form, it's such a cool form. I love it. I'm talking as a reader at first. So as a reader, I love it. If you read, there's so many things that can be done with it. For example, Jim Harrison's, there was a movie made about it that's a great movie. I think Robert Redford directed it, but Legends of the Fall. That was, I'm thinking of a different movie. That was not Redford. But anyways, great movie. It's based on a fantastic novella by Jim Harrison.
Yeah.
And so that novella, it covers this, like the movie, it covers this huge span of time.
Yes.
And it tells this story that's just, just sticks with you. And the movie is pretty faithful to it, So if
it is faithful, and it's a long movie. People are surprised that, when they learn that it is a novella.
Right.
You're right, yeah.
Right. There's something about that novella form that seems to translate well to films. Stand By Me, the Stephen King movie was based on, or I'm sorry, it's the Stephen King story but it was based on a novella called The Body. But long story short, I just really love the form. It can do a lot. So like you said, it's this long movie, right, that's based on this short novella that covers a lot, but also gets in there with depth. And I think the novella in itself kind of offers that. Yes. But, when I was writing this book, I was reading a lot of Richard Brautigan, and his books are novella length. I think he calls them novels. Yeah. Kind of like Dennis Johnson, a lot of his later books are short. Really, they're novella length, but they're called novels. But I love that. I love that form, and it allows you to do that. So I think part of that's the novella form, but this book is an even weirder form. So it's I call it a novella in flash fiction. And what I mean by that, flash fiction in general is, it's about 500 to 1,000 words, ballpark. And it's a self-contained story. So it's like a fiction or a story in a flash. Yeah. And so all the chapters are designed to be flash fiction stories that stand alone, yet also tell this accumulating, ongoing story about this revival preacher named Frank Russet, and and this cat named Buffalo on this journey that they take. So I think in addition to the novella just kind of being this great vehicle to tell a story and also have enough time to get into some detail, I think that those flash fiction chapters enable you to really bring the microscope in close, to really get in and know characters, and to know the interior life of characters, and then zoom out and go on to the next close up. Yeah. So I think the form allowed that and kind of encouraged that.
Yeah. Yeah. I recently read Claire Keegan's Small Things Like These, or something like that. I forget the title, but that one is also something, a small novella, but it packs such a punch and tells such a compelling story. So yeah, I love this. I love this kind of, these kind of, not enough, I think, books are released in this format. It really, I think, can draw in a lot of readers.
I agree. I think that, so first of all, that Claire Keegan book, I read that as well, and it's a great novella. Margaret Rankle had this article in the New York Times that she wrote maybe a month ago, 3 weeks or something, and it was kind of about the novella as a form. Yeah. And the popularity of that Claire Keegan, it was made into a movie as well. It's a fantastic novella. I think my theory on this, it goes back, I think it's the publishing company that they have in their mindset that, a novella is not enough. Yeah. So it wasn't always this way. If you look back, Steinbeck of Mice and Men, and you've got Hemingway's had a comeback and won the Pulitzer with The Old Man and the Sea, and this was packaged as its own book. But in recent times, to go back to Jim Harrison, he had to publish that. Legends of the Fall was in a book with 3 novellas. Yeah. So the publishing. I think the publishing company is disconnected from what readers want there.
Exactly. So Frank, your main character, you said you've been writing him for a long time. Why Frank? What drew you to him? How did he kind of build up in your head? The stories that he escapes prison and kind of forges on this journey, both internally and externally, with a cat named Buffalo. So while most of us aren't in the situation of escaping the law, we all need the opportunity to escape. What about Frank kind of helped you escape and kind of take you on this journey, for a literary journey?
So I like you had mentioned, I'd been writing about Frank for a number of years. I first started, the idea for this character of Frank came to me in 2014. So I guess, 11 years ago now?
Wow.
So I was just starting my MFA in creative writing at Eastern Kentucky University. They have a program called the Bluegrass Writers Studio. Mm-hmm. And I was teaching high school English at West Jasmine High School at the time. And so I remember when I signed up for the program, I was talking to Derek Nikitas, was the director at the time. Mm-hmm. And I said, when's the soonest I can join? Because I had been writing, but I wanted to just have an excuse to really stick in there and write, more and develop my writing more. And so when's the earliest time? I was talking in my classroom with him at the end of the day. I was cleaning up my classes and the students had left. And so he said, well, we could get you in this summer. And there's this summer residence that they have in Lisbon, Portugal. And speaking
wow.
of, right?
Uh-huh.
And speaking of escape, I love traveling. So that's one way I like to escape. So I said, well, that sounds great. You know, what writers are going to be there? And he said, well, Dennis Johnson is the keynote. And I said, what? Really? And there's still time? Like, yes, what do I need to do? I'll send it over immediately. And so I got to meet my writing hero over there. But this leads me to the answer to your question in a roundabout way. But there was a speaker there that was talking about the process of writing and inspiration. And they said, write about what obsesses you. Write about what obsesses you. And so I wanted to come out of the program with a novel, and I wanted to find my story and my character. And I thought about that, and I didn't know anyone in the program. I just joined, and was over there in Lisbon kind of on my own, And so I wandered around the streets of Barrio Alto, a neighborhood high above the Tagus River. And I was wandering around just thinking about this. I feel it's more instructive than write what you know.
Yeah.
Because write about what obsesses you, that's a whole other thing.
Mm-hmm.
And
something that doesn't leave you, that you can't escape from.
Yes. Right?
Yeah.
And so I've thought about this a lot since. I think that's good for readers too, because if you're obsessed with it, then we always want to hear people talk about what they're obsessed with and why. But anyways, I thought about, there was this really good friend of mine who I actually went to Dunbar High School with, my buddy Mark, and he had this great uncle that was kind of this bigger than life character who had been a revival preacher who had built this following, and I had met people who knew him, and they just talked about him like he was the most authentic person. He would meet someone once and then go through town again and remember, how was your aunt that was sick with this? And would just sort of remember and had this real concern for people. And then also there were allegations of fraud. So he was this person that was kind of hard to know who was he really.
Like morally ambiguous.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you always wonder about characters like that. Who are they really? And what part is authentic? What part is put on?
Yeah.
Which, to your point,
what's the act? What's the,
Yes.
Yeah.
And we all have that to an extent. So it kind of goes back to this universality in that trait. But that was my character. I wanted to write about a character like this. So that was the inspiration for Frank. And so I wrote that novel for the next 3-4 years. I worked on that novel, and I thought I was done with Frank. And then I was traveling for work through Pineville, Kentucky. There's on Pine Mountain, there's this place called Bell County Forestry Camp. My character Frank had wound up there in the first novel. And so I was there, and I just got this idea for this other story. I just imagined him walking away from this minimum security prison, which is its own kind of quandary. It's and sometimes you can just walk away.
Yeah.
It's in the wilderness. Really, the thing that keeps you there is the wilderness around it. But why would somebody do that? They're going to be out soon. And so there was this cat that wandered into his life very briefly. Didn't even have a name in the first novel. And I thought, no, that cat's important. And so that just led me to this whole new story about Frank, and it was cool. It was kind of like seeing an old friend I didn't know if I'd see again, getting to spend time with him again and figure out who he is.
That's awesome. I love how you phrase that. A new friend that you get to see again. So while reading Pineville Trace, I couldn't help but draw some similarities to other Kentucky writers. A lot of Kentucky writers use the land and nature as part of their story, but more of a character than actual setting. Who from Kentucky inspires you as a writer?
I've been really lucky to study under some Kentucky writers that I really admire. When I went to UK, and I took my very first creative writing classes with Gurney Norman. And he was fantastic. Mm-hmm. And he would write. I remember I've started doing this recently. I'd forgotten this. But when he would give feedback on our manuscripts, he would put a little exclamation point by lines that he liked or that were good or well done or had energy. And he wouldn't explain it. He would just put an exclamation point. Mm-hmm. And I had forgotten that. But when I go back and revise my manuscripts now, matter of fact, I've got a satchel right here with my new manuscript that I'm working on. I did it in this one too. Instead of just fixing things, if I found something that I really liked, I'd put an exclamation point like Gurney did. Oh. And just, to kind of let myself know, okay, I like that. But Gurney was a big influence on me. His book, Kinfolks, I think there's a lot of these Kentucky writers, like Gurney Norman, I studied under James Baker Hall. Wow. And I took a Kentucky literature class and an Appalachian literature class with Gurney as well at UK. So James Stills had a big impact on me. There's a book called, the name escapes me, but it'll come back to me. But there were so many of these books that really stuck with me, and James Baker Hall is kind of strange. His book, when I had his class, he won the Poet Laureate, and so we actually drove up and went to his ceremony at Frankfurt, which was a lot of fun. But his book, his collection, Mother on the Other Side of the World, I had forgotten this, but I went back and looked at it. I was looking for this poem, this mysterious poem that I can't find. Me and my friends are trying to find it. It's one of my favorite poems. And so I was looking through it, and I realized there's buffalo in there, there's cats in there, there's this repeating imagery, and I thought, wow, I had forgotten that. And so to your question, I wonder how much of, these Kentucky writers that have influenced me over the years are in my subconscious somewhere.
Yeah, so Gurney Norman, I wasn't familiar with him, but one of our librarians did his book. I think it is Kinfolk, that in her book club, and that's when I started reading his work. It's incredible that you got to study under him. So are you currently working on a project or that you want to share with us, or are you the kind of writer that likes to package up a project, lock it up, and then move on to another one?
So, yes, I did. The things that I'm really working on now, the one I was telling you about, so the first novel that I wrote about Frank, it's called Antenna. And it's kind of cool because when I've had events, had a number of events at Joseph Beth Carmichael's. We have a few coming up at the Carnegie, and we have one here at the library, Lexington Public Library with Rick Childers. It's coming up in April. But one thing that I like to hear is the questions that people have. They want to know more about Frank, and they want to know about his relationship with his brother and his relationship with Lucinda. And so the cool thing is the first novel is all about that. It's him. So those listening that haven't read the book yet, Pineville Trace, it's about somebody later in life, kind of looking back on their life and trying to figure out who they really are. And so the Antenna is him making his way in the world. It's him growing up and building a following, as a revival preacher. So there's been a couple chapters published, Louisiana Literature Journal and elsewhere, but the whole novel hasn't found a home yet. It's come dangerously close. It's had 3 or 4 agents have requested a full manuscript, which doesn't happen real often. And it's been a finalist and a semifinalist for Uno Lab Prize and for Sundress Publications reading. So it's come close. It'll find a good home. So that's when I'm
sure it will.
And I need to find more time to send it out because I've really been, writing the new book and kind of doing events with Pineville Trace lately. But that's one. And this other one I'm excited about, I've been writing since April 2024. And so I call it, the working title is To Bury, and it's about this girl named Jamie, and it's about her. She has kind of this traumatic upbringing, and she's trying to find things to hold on to make her way and find out who she is and move through the world. Yeah. And so ironically, Kentucky literature is something that she finds and grabs onto in that novel.
That's awesome. I love it. Frank is one of those characters that kind of like you see yourself in him and, kind of questioning the decisions that you've made in your past and not necessarily being proud of those decisions, but, everybody has that in their life. So it's lovely reading your book, but I'd love for you to read a section from Pineville Trace, if you don't mind.
So, well, thank you, first of all. And so this chapter is called Winter. And so the book is in 3 parts. And so this isn't really much of a spoiler alert here, but this is just, to bring the reader up to speed here. Frank has walked away from this minimum security prison in eastern Kentucky, and he's found this cabin in the wilderness in Canada. And so he's followed this stray cat buffalo. They're traveling together. So this brings them to their life in the cabin. Winter. In the cabin enveloped by pines and silence, when the birds and leaves had gone, Frank began the hard work of understanding. After starting the fire in the morning, Frank had the rest of the day to sit in the cabin and think. In his life, he had always acted out of instinct, and now he wanted to understand. He could not rely on motion now. There was no work to distract himself, no motion, no plan. He would have to look deeply into the blurred lines that remained. He was not afraid anymore. That is, he was not afraid of being afraid. So much of his life had not been logical, had been based on instinct, especially the big decisions. He knew it wasn't logical to escape from a minimum security prison. It was absurd, foolish, a place you'd be released from in a short time anyway, a place that was, after all, not so bad. And now, as a result, he He could never return to regular life. But he now understood why he had left, why he had to leave, why he had followed Buffalo down the mountain path out of that prison's weak walls. He felt it then, but now he understood. The lines between his freedom and prison had been as ghost-like as the lines now were between past-present, life-death, light-dark, self-other, inner-outer, sky-earth, his story, and other stories. But he was free now, free forever, freer than he'd ever been if he'd done his time and gotten out by the book. Because now he was free from himself. He never had to be himself again, and he was glad of that. A long time ago, he had gotten tired of being himself, tired of the sound of his own name, the sound of his own voice. And now he could never go back to his old self. They would lock him away again if he became his old self, and he was glad. Even when he was at his peak, or what outwardly looked like his peak, when he had a voice, a face, a name people knew and admired, when he wore the finest suits of his life, tailored to his slim body before he had started to grow old in body and spirit, when everything beautiful was offered to him at every moment, he had already begun to go through the motions, had begun to look for a way out. On the bright day the daisy was picked, he saw its petals already withered. First, it had been the routine of his revival, so carefully constructed and revised over years that every scene built on the last, every ritual building on evoking an emotion that built on the last, complemented, contrasted, and led up to the culminating reaction. Timing, order, last-minute adjustments and improvisations, reactions to tailor to the precise moment, place, individual, crowd. All of it became an act. Like an actor moving through the same play night after night. Worse, a method actor who tried to forget he had immersed himself in his character. Every town melted to one. Every night melted to one. Every face in the crowd melted to one. Perhaps this was the beginning of the lines between things blurring, and his recent brush with dying had just sped the process along the rest of the way. But at the peak, when he had gotten everything he wanted, suddenly all of it became meaningless. He felt nothing. And then the feeling spread throughout his life, like an ink pen bleeding out onto a white tablecloth. Every interaction went on cruise control, every relationship, every action, every moment. So he had changed his life. Stopped traveling, stopped the revivals, separated himself from his brother, found his new country, and quickly abandoned it. Found his antenna, started his radio work, reaching people with his sermons and rituals over the radio waves instead of in the flesh, and that became just as meaningless, even faster. He was tired. Tired of always putting on a show. In a way, the fraud charge in prison had been a relief, but he knew if he had returned to his life post-prison, he would always have to prove to people whether he was a fraud or God's instrument. And he didn't want to be either. He didn't want to convince people of either. He didn't want to convince anyone of anything anymore. He'd been convincing people all his life. He'd been convincing himself, and it had left him very tired.
Wow. So this is probably one of my favorite chapters in the book because it encompasses Frank and his struggles, both internally and externally, and just the concept of feeling like he was a fraud and, kind of not necessarily just the laws that he broke, but also just from within himself and the way he connects with other people. So I love that. Thank you so much for reading it. And thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Yep. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, that was fun talking to Wes Blake.
Yes, it was. He was a really fascinating author. And I have not read the book yet, but I'm really looking forward to it now.
Yeah, it's really that's why I love novellas.
Yeah.
You can, read it in one or two settings. So it's for a busy mom, as we both are. It's a great way to get your reading fix in while, getting some literary enjoyment out of it. So, I'm excited to have him. So Molly Stout, our librarian at Beaumont, is going to have him for her Check Me Out book club.
That's amazing.
So since there is a cat in this book, Molly's going to be doing this one I believe in April. And then him and another author, Rick Childers, I think is going to do an author talk also at Beaumont. So be on the lookout for that. it'll be exciting stuff. You'll get to meet the authors and get your book signed and all that stuff.
Wonderful.
And I believe he mentioned there is a Goodreads giveaway of his book that is running until February 28th. So,
yes. So check out his author page for more details.
Yep. So this month, the books that I want to talk about, there's 2 of them.
Okay.
One fiction and one nonfiction.
Perfect.
The first one is called Tilt by Emma Patty. It's Pattee. And this one is a bit of like a thriller. So Annie is 9 months pregnant.
Okay.
At an IKEA. And an earthquake happens.
Oh, no.
So the book is a span of one day.
Okay.
And it's her trying to escape out of out of danger from the earthquake, but it's also takes you like flashbacks as to what got her to the IKEA, and you kind of find out a little bit about her relationship with her husband and other people in her life. So she ends up making friends with other people. It's kind of like an explosive. There's explosive scenes in the book. It's really exciting. And again, like a novella, it's not. This one is a novel, not necessarily a novella, but it has a lot of like impactful scenes in the book. So it's really exciting. The second one is a book by John Green, who a lot of us know from his YA novels like A Fault in Our Stars and
Looking for Alaska, Paper Towns.
Exactly. So John Green is releasing a nonfiction book called Everything is Tuberculosis, The History and the Persistence of Our Deadliest Infection. And this one delves into tuberculosis from a historical stance, where it started, how it spread, the breakouts across the world and in the United States, and how, this is an infection that is really hard to get a handle on it. It's really fascinating. John Green's writing is so compelling. He tells a story like very few people can. So he meets Henry, who was a TB patient in Sierra Leone, and that's what inspired him to write this book. But yeah, it is fascinating. It is both sad and uplifting at the same time, but it's really timely.
Yes, with the outbreak in Kansas City
exactly,
right now.
Exactly. But it's not a fear-mongering book. It's more along the lines of educating people about it.
Great.
When we know something, we don't fear it. But at the same time, there is a sense of urgency for people to take their precautions contracting this disease. So those are the 2 books that I got to review over the last few weeks, and I'm excited to see coming out in March.
Wonderful.
So what's happening in the library, Erin?
So what's happening? So we're going to go over some that start a little bit later in February, since this is February's episode. I want to make sure you guys have time to actually get to them. This one has a wait list, but it's just too cool sounding to not include. It's Make a Victorian Valentine.
Nice.
And that is Thursday, February 6th at 2 here at Northside. And you're going to learn how to make a Victorian-style Valentine. And those, if you have seen them, are kind of frilly, but they also can be a little bit dark and interesting, and sometimes a little bit
can be gothic,
creepy,
or
gothic,
or lacy and pretty.
Yes, you can. Victorian can span the difference of if you're frilly, lacy, or if you're a little more of a goth girl. You can join the wait list for that one. At Eastside, there is Learn About Lexington Black History with Raynette Jones, who we have featured here on the podcast a few years ago. She came on to talk about the notable Kentucky African-American database.
Yes, we did have her on Tales from the Kentucky Room.
Yes.
She's such an awesome guest.
She was wonderful.
Yeah.
So she's going to talk more about the database there at Eastside.
So knowledgeable and just so willing to answer anybody's questions. Yes. And she's amazing.
So that is Saturday, February 8th at 2 o'clock. And there's no registration on that, so feel free to just drop in and learn some really cool stuff from a very cool person. Yeah. There's open mic night. It's a Vibes and Vision 2025 preview, and that is at Northside. It's Wednesday, February 12th at 5:30, and you can stop by. Yeah, the full program is a little bit later in the month, and I'm really excited about it, but it's a sneak peek to share poetry, music, spoken word. Content should be appropriate for teenagers, and then limited to 3 to 5 minutes if you want to participate, or if you just want to come listen, you can do that as well.
I love that. We have a cool program coming up also in April that I'm excited for people to see. But this is a preview, I think, to that one. So I can't talk too much about it because it's kind of still in the works. But But yeah, I'm excited.
East side, there's Camp Nelson in a Box on Saturday, February 15th
What?
at 2 p.m. Yes, so learn about Black history in Lexington with the Camp Nelson National Monument. It is a history program. It's for tweens and teens to learn more about our history here in Lexington.
That's awesome. I love Camp Nelson.
Yes.
If you haven't gotten out there, you should totally go.
It's a great place.
Yeah. Sign up for the tour or just walk the grounds. It's a beautiful place.
It is. And then there's the Early Bird Book Club, and this one is featuring The Vice President's Black Wife by Amrita Chakrabarti Myers. And she actually did some of her research here in the Kentucky room. Nice. So it's a cool little connection that we have with this book. But it's read the riveting, troubling, and complicated story of Julia Ann Chin, enslaved wife of Richard Mentor Johnson, U.S. Vice President under Martin Van Buren. She managed his estate in Georgetown, Kentucky.
Yeah, that one is a fascinating book. If you have interest in local history, this one's a really good one. Don't miss this book. It's a lot of information that very few people know.
And that is on Wednesday, February 19th at 9:30 in the morning. So that's your Early Bird Book Club.
That's our Early Bird Book Club. It's one of our many book clubs here in the library. It's run by Heather Pritchard over at Tate's Creek. Yes. It's a very very active book club. So yeah, it's really cool.
Now, this one is actually being held outside of the library. This is at the Black and Williams Community Center gym. Mm-hmm. It's the Vibes and Vision Youth Arts Talent Showcase. Yes. So in honor of Black History Month, join us at the Black and Williams Community Center gym for an arts event celebrating our youth performers.
Cool beans.
So there's no registration for that one. It's Saturday, February 22nd at 1:30 and runs until 4:30.
That is another cool program. I think we did it last year on a smaller scale, but I'm excited to have this partnership with that group. Tony and Brian were talking to me about it previously, and it sounds like an exciting event for our tweens and teens. And so, yeah, check it out.
That'll be awesome. And then there's a civics workshop with Civic Lex, Understanding Lexington City Government, on Saturday, February 22nd at 2 o'clock at Beaumont Branch. And it's just designed to help all of us learn more about our local government.
That's awesome. Civic Lex is probably one of my favorite nonprofit organizations in the city.
Yes. They do lots of great work.
Very good educational work for both young and old people. You know, you run into a lot of people that don't understand the inner workings of our local government, which is, you know, a lot of where the decisions that affect our daily lives are being made. So I think it's important for people to know and stay connected with our local government. So they do a lot of good work over there.
They do. All right, and this one is for 3rd to about 8th grade. It's Les McCann Art-alike, and it's at Tate's Creek Branch on Thursday, February 27th at 4 p.m. And it celebrates native Lexingtonian artist, photographer, and musician Les McCann will create watercolor masterpieces inspired by his work. So if you're 3rd to 8th grade, join us to create some really cool art based on a local artist.
What a wide array of programming. I'm excited.
Yes, and we have one more. It's in March, but I'm going to go ahead and say it because it's in March 1st, and our next episode will miss it. It's Aliens, UFO, and Life in the Universe, and it is here at Northside on Saturday, March 1st at 1 o'clock, and it's Aliens. Are they real? Join NASA and JPL Solar System Ambassador Dan Price for a facts-based discussion of alien life.
That should be exciting.
That would be exciting.
Wow.
It's got registration, so make sure if you want to come that you sign up through our website. It's events.lexpublib.org/events.
Nice.
Yep.
Thanks, Erin.
You're welcome.
Thank you for tuning into Turning the Page. If you enjoyed listening, there will be more to come, so please give us a follow so that you don't miss the next episode.
We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts.